And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO at Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the LinkedIn Live version of Leveraging Thought Leadership. And today, my guest is Kristie Jones. She's the author of Selling Your Way In. She is a coach, a speaker, a consultant. She's got 20 years of B2B SaaS startup sales experience and is just launched her first book. So, welcome aboard, Kristie. How are you?
Good, Peter. Thank you so much. Yep. Like you said, it's launch week. Very
It's
exciting.
launch week. So we were just chatting before we went live, and you broke Amazon yesterday.
I did break
You broke
Amazon. We sold out by 9 a.m. Central Time. So yeah, good news, bad news, but there's plenty of other places around the country that you can get our book.
Exactly. So you've got an interesting backstory and a niche in terms of the B2B SaaS sales. So it's not another sales book for everybody. It's not for everybody, right? So give me a sense of sort of how the idea came about and what your hopes are relative to what the book's going to do for you over the next year to 5.
Yeah, sure. I actually started out I'd written a course. I produced a course on Udemy over the pandemic on prospecting fundamentals. And so my thought was, I'll just take that book or that course and make it into a book. And about 2 months in, I was working with a book coach here locally in St. Louis. Her name's Dixie Gillespie. And I told him, I need to take 30 days off. And she was like, okay. And so I came back 30 days later and I said, this book is boring. I don't want to write it. I'm bored. I'm bored writing it. But I want to write a book. So what should we do? So we brainstormed. And one of the things that I had been seeing out in the marketplace, so to speak, working with the B2B SaaS companies was, we as a collective industry of B2B SaaS are missing targets big time, right? There's a couple of reasons for that. Quotas are a little bit outrageous and revenue targets as a result of a lot of these companies being VC backed. So I'm going to throw some shade at the VC community there first and foremost. But secondly, so the quota attainment was just a little bit ridiculously high. And I think as I was starting to really spend time with companies and talk to sales professionals and work with them in a coaching capacity, I realized that a lot of sales professionals have put themselves in the wrong sales role, selling the wrong thing into the wrong industry, working for the wrong company, and ultimately the wrong sales leaders. And I believe that a lot of the reasons why quota attainment is being missed outside of some of the unrealism that's going on is that people don't really sales professionals don't understand their sales superpower. They don't know how to identify it. They don't know how to leverage it to make it work for them. And as a result, they're not selling the right thing for themselves in order to, maximize their income and own their life, as I say. So I decided
because most of what we see and read about on the enterprise sales, forget just B2B SaaS, but more broadly speaking, enterprise sales is all about the technology, right? Yep. It's Salesforce, it's Gong, it's data, it's predictive analytics, on and on and on and on and on. And we're not seeing a lot coming out into the marketplace about, okay, well, what about the human side here, right? So if the technology did everything, then we don't need salespeople. That's called being marketed, and it goes into a shopping cart, click next, take out your Amex. That's not how it works in B2B SaaS, right? Or enterprise sales, et cetera. So it sounds like that's more of your focus, is really getting back to what do you need to do as an individual contributor on the sales side to get your job done.
Yeah, you've been eavesdropping, Peter, on my back stage rants over here. We have leaned way too heavily into the science of sales, and as a result, I believe the art of sales is going to become extinct if we don't stop the madness right now. So yes, I mean, I'm looking the top 10 percenters, as I call them. They're doing personal and professional development all the time. Yep. So I interview candidates all the time, and I ask the following question. So tell me what professional sales training that you've been provided by past employers.
Right.
And 60+% of the time I hear I haven't been. Nothing has been done. I've got product training. I know how to use, again, like you said, I know how to use the tool, the sales, the cool kid tech stack, as I call it. Right. I know how to do all that, but no, I haven't really provided what I call sales soft skills training.
Right.
So my follow-up question to that is, so what have you done for yourself? Right. Even though your company sucks, that doesn't exempt you from getting trained.
Well, what's amazing about that is in most functions, you could see somebody justify somebody. You could justify somebody saying, "Well, if they don't, provide it for me, what do I care?" Right? If I'm a ops person, supply chain, most other professions. In sales, let's be honest, a big chunk of your comp is variable. So why would you not
Right.
be? It's insane. But the
Right.
percentage of individual contributors that forget money. I mean, money is a small piece of it, but there's plenty of stuff out there for free, time, energy, effort, etc. I bet if you even ask those same people, what were the last 5 books you read on sales methodology, negotiations? Do they have a growth mindset? Is what you're asking. Are you
That's correct.
committed to continual learning and development? And if you're not, you shouldn't be in sales. You shouldn't be in most of it.
And that is my follow-up question underneath a professional development topic of my interview questions is, who do you follow? What podcasts are you listening to? What's the last book you read on business or sales? What webinars, seminars, what are you attending?
Yep.
Because yes, the top 10 percenters are going to own that regardless of what their company does. They're going to be grateful if their company provides it, but if their company doesn't or their sales leader is not capable, then they're going to go figure that out on them, on their own for themselves. So
but those were the people that 30 years ago, their cars were filled with,
cassette tapes.
8-track cassette tapes of, Brian Tracy.
Brian Tracy, exactly. Yep.
Yep. Same thing. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, because you got the big thing. You open again. You and I are old. Yeah. You open it up. You got 6 cassette tapes on this side and 6 on this side. And Anthony Robbins or Brian Tracy was. Yeah. Exactly. That's exactly right. Those are those people. But we're not doing that anymore. And it's easier than ever. Right.
So that I don't understand. Right. Because not that we're old, we're let's say experienced, but some like not exactly
more mature.
But it was harder to get good, high quality information as a professional that was hungry for it, for both personal growth as well as your income growth. Right? It wasn't as easy.
Mm-hmm.
Now between your phone and this, like I can get anything I want anytime I want 24/7, but I'm not doing it. Like what? Like what's up with that? So give me a sense of. If it's not the 10% probably doesn't need you because the incremental improvement you're going to get probably doesn't justify the expense. Who's typically hiring you and what does an intervention look like?
Who's typically hiring me is the startup founder or the CEO who's missing revenue targets and, or sometimes they've been playing sales leader, if you will, or they're just missing revenue targets and they're confused by why. They're tired of hearing the excuses. They're hearing the same thing all the time. Nothing's changing. And so I come in and look under the hood. Like, it's a paid evaluation, right? I come in and I look at 3 things: people, process, and tools, right? I'm going to interview all of your people, including marketing. I'm going to look at your processes and look at your tools and try to figure out where the brokenness is.
Well, that's classic consulting, right? But what's interesting about what you said is they're missing revenue targets. So if you're the founder of a VC-backed entity and you're missing revenue targets, you feel the noose tightening. You
got big problems. Yeah, you got big problems.
You don't get to do that multiple times in a row and still keep your job. You might have keep your shares, whatever, but you will soon be an alum, right?
That's correct.
How come they're not? And this is sort of the burglar alarm problem, right? Nobody buys a burglar alarm the day before their house was attempted to be robbed. It's always the day after. How come they're not wise enough or thinking strategically or long term enough to go? Smells like we may not. Like we hit the last one, but geez, it was really, really hard. It's getting harder and harder to hit it. And it feels like we might not. Why do they always wait till after the fact, till the numbers come out and go, uh-oh?
Yeah. First off, funnels are a fantasy. So they look at the pipeline, right? They are looking at the pipeline. The sales leader is telling them the pipeline's fine. They're looking at the pipeline. The sales reps go, I got enough in there. Everything's going to be fine. This is all going to close by the end of Q4. So the funnel's a fantasy because no one has discipline around the fact that stalled is not a sales stage, right? If they told you it's going to be 2025 before they're ready to do anything, then that's a closed loss deal today. That's not in the pipeline. But we've got so much garbage in the pipeline that, again, and everybody loves to wear their rose-colored glasses, right? They look very fashionable. So, the river denial I hear is very warm and smooth, and rose-colored glasses are very fashionable. So, because again, they don't have the discipline to go in and say, hey, I've seen, this is what I do. The first thing I do when I go in there to do the look under the hood thing is I go, I need access to your CRM system, like as a super admin. And I go on and I pull the rep and I go, hey, I don't see you have had no 2-way communication with your main contact for 6 weeks. What's going on? oh yeah, no, we're going to get back in touch, in November, that, budgets are going to open up. And I go, okay, so that's a closed loss deal. Well, no, they're going to buy. They're going to buy, but they just didn't want me to bother them again until November. And I said, right, so that's a closed loss deal. And then if you can reinvigorate that or get the ball to start moving again in November, good for you. And you can put it back in as a new deal. But that's a closed loss deal.
How many salespeople, sales professionals, sales managers, if they were really honest, and you went into their CRM, there's that, pick a number, 20, 30, 40% that are hanging somewhere between 5 and 20% weighted probability, that are quite old,
Yep.
that are expired. There's an expiration date on a carton of eggs, but not on a lead. But
Right.
they stay in there, and it's kind of like, all right, who are you really kidding, right? Like, if this was, you were counting on that money to save your child's life, would you really still have it in there at that weighted probability? Like, there is a little bit of, because you can play with the numbers and how many organizations are still doing a weighted probability average to forecast revenue, and then it comes to bite them in the ass, and like,
yep,
there's a lot of fiction in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, remember, professional sales people are, professionally selling themselves and their propaganda, right? I mean, like, of all the professions, the finance guys and girls aren't great at selling that. The, operations people, not so much. But, when you sell yourself every single day, and again, and remember, most sales leaders were individual contributors at some point.
Yes.
So like, there's sympathy there, right? Like, oh man, like I know, like I remember the time when whatever, but it doesn't do you any good. And when CEOs and founders are not, and owners are not involved in that pipeline review process and asking the really hard questions, you're going to find a lot of fantasy in that funnel.
Okay. So you've got this great IP that you've developed and continue to develop, right? And it lives in a lot of places, right? Obviously now it's living in the book, right? So it's codified and it's polished and you can go and buy it and all those other sort of things. But you're using that same stuff in a lot of different ways in terms of how you monetize it. And what I found interesting on your site and getting to know you a bit is there's the hiring piece, right? You're helping people onboard and hire. That's one way to use your IP. You're coaching. That's another way to use the IP. You're consulting. You have your courses. What other ways do you envision, maybe in the near to midterm, putting or formats that you'd be putting those ideas into to democratize them, scale them, monetize them?
Yeah. My whole goal is one to many. So as I'm aging, more mature, I know I'm not going to be able to touch everybody, right? I'm not going to be able to individually come in and make the impact that I do when I work with clients directly. And so the book is a one to many strategy. Speaking engagements, another way to monetize it for a one to many. E-learning courses, like you said, workshops. So I haven't really, I just rebranded as the book was coming out, and I really had not been doing a lot of like workshops with the high, with larger numbers of sales professionals. But I also think that there's a lot of benefit to bringing people together from potentially different companies, different situations, and teaching them some of the main things that top 10 percenters are doing, but letting them then network with each other. I think remember back in the day, we were I was talking to somebody the other day and I said, remember, like, you lived and died by like your industry association. Like you attended all the local events, the regional events, the national conference, like you rubbed elbows with your people all the time. Like we're not doing, I mean, heck, we don't even meet our coworkers and our bosses sometimes in person ever. Right. And so I'm trying to figure out ways to bring people together to even, start a little community of individuals that are like-minded, who are selling in B2B SaaS. Maybe they've been in a startup situation. So I'm really looking for that one to many people.
Because on the one hand, it's easier than ever to do that. Years ago, that meant getting on a plane and going to Phoenix once a year or whatever your gig was, right? Or meeting up for a breakfast or something like that in your local city. It's easier than ever because that does not have to be in person. It could easily be remote. And the exchange of ideas amongst professionals in similar scenarios and situations that are non-competitive, that's gold, right? Yet it's harder than ever because folks aren't doing it, right? So there's this rub of, particularly post-COVID, in order to justify an in-person workshop, it's like an act of God, right? You have to justify to the buyer why this has to be done. And I think part of that is COVID got everybody to be honest about the math, right? It used to be, oh, well, the day rate for the facilitator is, pick a number, $10,000 or whatever. Oh, so it's 10 grand to put that event on. No, it's not 10,000 because you have travel, you have opportunity costs, you're putting 30 high paid people in a room. It's probably a multiple of that. And then once they started to do the math on that, now you have a much higher bar to justify, to basically say, okay, all right, Chris, if you want to get, 10 of my people in a room, that's a $30,000 experience. Show me the money. How do I measure that impact and ROI?
Yeah, agreed. And I think you can still have an impact virtually, but I am finding that I just got together with a client of mine. I'm helping them build an e-learning course for
Mhm.
they're in the SBA space, lending
Mhm.
space. And so we brought together 10 people from all over the country to Tulsa, Oklahoma. So again, like this was not the conference capital of the world.
Right, right,
But we got
right.
people to go to Tulsa, Oklahoma 2 weekends ago, and we wanted to interview them. So we interviewed the top BDAs and BDOs across the country, brought together one of their top clients and some of their employees to do an in-person workshop with me. And we could not have replicated that, right? Like we could not have replicated the connections that we made, the conversations we had, even, after work, happy hour, we did a dinner one night and kind of a happy hour around the pool the next
Mhm.
night, and lunch. There were several of us who didn't fly out till late on Saturday, so we all went to lunch together. Like that was such an amazing. I mean, I heard
Yep.
from everybody. Like we all contended. Like even this week, we're still on the group chat together from that situation, and we're still pinging each other about things,
Yeah,
and that just doesn't happen virtually anymore like
yeah,
that. You can't
yeah,
make that connection. But so it is an investment. To your point, it's not cheap. It is an investment, but and again, you can't do it multiple times a year. But there are people who've earned the right to be able to fly and be in person at an event to gain the knowledge that they needed to gain. And so I just think companies need to be thinking more and more about that. Is particularly like the company that I mentioned that we got together in Tulsa. They don't even have an office. But two of them lived in Tulsa. So we were like, okay, 2 out of 10. So that was the epicenter.
right, right. Cool. So now that the book is out, let's assume it's a year from now and your goals are achieved relative to the book, and we're having this chat a year from now. What does the other side of this look like for you? Or what do you hope the other side of this looks like?
I think it's another book. I think so this one really was for mostly individual contributors. And I think I'd like to tackle some of the things that I mentioned earlier with sales leadership. And one of the things, you asked about that, and I used the word discipline, but I'll
Mhm.
change that and say I think the next book's going to be about creating a culture of accountability, because I think that's part of the problem, right? We're not holding each other accountable. We're not holding our employees accountable. We're not holding other departments accountable. And that's how things get sideways, right? If you have a culture of
So,
accountability, everybody's going to hold each other accountable, and it doesn't have to come from the top. But even now, I'm not seeing a lot of accountability from the top.
so stay there a minute, because you could be in a high accountability culture and not hold yourself accountable. You'll probably be tissue rejected. But the other is often true. You can be in a loosey goosey non accountability culture, but you have that disciplined sales professional that's incredibly holds themselves to account and performs like crazy. Obviously, it's best if there's alignment, right? If you've got a bunch of individuals that are holding themselves accountable, a team that holds them accountable, and an organization that appreciates accountability and practices what they preach, right? So, do you think a lot of the issue now with listen, going back to the dinosaurs, people have been complaining about not meeting their quotas and all that. Like,
Right.
if everybody met their quota, something's wrong, right? Your price is too low, or it's too low. But there's a difference between a little bit of a stretch goal or whatever,
Mhm.
or crapping out your quota by 50%, right? Like there's not it's not a binary, did you miss it? It kind of is, but not really, you know.
Yep. No, I would push back a little bit and say that the person who is holding themselves accountable will be miserable in a non-accountability culture, right? Because they're not because right like so if you don't have accountability culture and you hire an A player, good luck, because they're going to need finance. They're going
Yeah.
to need the customer success and account management team. They're going to need other teams in order to hit their quota, who then they won't be able to get, who won't do what they say they're going to do when they say they're going to do it. They've got to track them down. Those kind of people will be gone. They'll be out of your organization because they're like, hey, I don't have
That's
time
the
to be.
tissue reject piece, right? So an organization could reject an individual, but an individual could look around and going, I'm hanging out with a bunch of losers. I don't want to be here. This isn't for me,
That's
right?
right.
Well, I get that. Because the high performers, like you were talking about the top 10%, they should be treated as volunteers because they can go get another gig somewhere else, right?
That's
They're
right.
not, you need them more than they need you. And there are needs besides financial that you have to satisfy that are probably a bit more intrinsic. Like it's easy to figure out how to pay salespeople well that perform well,
Yep.
not easy to figure out how to meet them intrinsically.
Well, top 10 percenters want to hang out with other top 10 percenters.
Yeah,
They don't want to hang out with that other 90. And if your team and your company is made up with a bunch of 90 percenters, top 10 percenters aren't going to stick around. They, again, like iron sharpens iron.
yeah, exactly. All right. I want to segue for the last couple minutes here into the book from the standpoint of go back to when you first started to think about writing the book and you talked about, the topic and you changed it and all that to where it is now. What was different or what did you learn along the way that you didn't expect early on as part of the process of writing, publishing, and now you're in that sort of heavy marketing phase?
Yep. I have a journalism degree. So I was excited. I love writing. I write on my blog posts. I mean, I write everything. Writing is just something that comes naturally to me. And I used to tell people like I never use my degree in journalism, but I use it every day and it makes me a better communicator because I've got really strong written communication skills.
Okay.
And so what surprised me was about the discipline I was needing to put in place because I just thought, oh, I'll just sit down and I love writing. Well, at some point you don't love writing. And so things that I didn't expect that I learned was that it takes me about 30 minutes to get in the zone. And so if I just couldn't set aside 45 or an hour because the first 30 minutes I was probably going to trash. Like there was a lot of deleting going on for me to get back in it. And the more days that I went in between writing, the harder it got. And so if I could
let me pause you there because everybody's got a different personal cadence. Some people, I got to get up at 4:30 in the morning and it's the first hour and a half. Some people, I go to the cabin, some people, whatever.
Yep.
There is no one right way, but for you, this learning about yourself to say, if I can't get in the zone and the longer the time between I've been in the zone, the harder it is, means that you got to allocate time to be in the zone and do it fairly frequently, or it's going to be frustrating, right? It's going to just and not effective.
Well, yeah, it's inefficient because it takes you so long, and me in my particular case, if it takes me so long to get restarted, then by the time I get restarted and I'm back in the zone, I'm like, oops, I've got a client call.
Yeah.
Right. So I did the hack I learned for me, and everybody did it differently, but I talked to a lot of people who wrote books who said, like, I literally just went and holed up in a hotel for X number of days or weeks.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm a solopreneur. Like my clients won't really appreciate me taking a 4-week sabbatical to write my book, of which will not help them necessarily. But I went to the public library and they had a quiet room. And it was windows everywhere. So like windows into the library, but natural lighting coming in from the out. And there was no cell phones, no talking, no nothing. And there was some days I was alone and some days I was with 2 other people or 3 other people. And a lot of times there were students coming in either after class or around finals time. And there was 0 distractions. Like there was no laundry to change. There was no dishwasher to unload. There was no, Amazon delivery at the front door. And so I started to figure, and even today, when I need to get a project done and I need some quiet time, I still go to the library and go to the quiet room.
Okay. So the first piece is figure out crack the code on you, obviously. What else did you learn in terms of getting it on paper and or packaging, positioning, and getting the book out into the marketplace?
I think storytelling was super important. So the very first thing we did, like step 1, my book coach said, go write all of the interesting sales stories with people that you've worked with in the past and get those in writing. And then almost every chapter or every topic, we went and pulled from, like we figured out what we needed and what was maybe missing from a sales story perspective. And that was the fun part. Like I've already heard from people saying that, so, that really resonated with me. I love how you story told something back to that topic. So that, we teach that in sales, right? Like how important storytelling is. But
I think from a thought leadership perspective, a lot of people think of their thought leadership strictly as the IP, the models, the methods, the frameworks, etc. And I love what you're doing. You could categorize all those things and say, okay, let me just jar my memory. What are 5 stories that'll help me think about whatever, right? Oh, you get those down because you need the stories to connect the dots. Otherwise, it's just a bad PowerPoint in book form.
Right.
Right.
Some people will remember the stories. They might not remember the exact point.
Yeah.
But it's like a good commercial, right? Sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, you see that commercial, but you can't come up with the who, right?
Right.
Like what was the toothpaste brand? But you remember the commercial because it was so impactful. Unfortunately, the toothpaste brand misses out there. But yeah, I think that was the other thing. And then as we got to the packaging part, I really struggled with actually some interesting things. I struggled with the front cover because
Okay.
that seemed like, I went through several design revisions, if you will. And till I had my mentor, Mike Weinberg, who wrote the forward for my
Yeah.
book, told me how important it was. He said, if you don't like it, you will never like it. It will never grow on you. And so
Mhm.
I pushed back hard on the publisher. Like I made them go through multiple revisions, multiple color, choices, those type of things until I got something that I felt good about.
Mhm.
Because I remember him saying with that, like, you will live with, like, you're never going to change the cover. You'll never change it. Like if you hate it today, you will always hate it. And so like, don't hate it.
I love that. I love it. But and then I would just say the other side of that is there are others that obsess over the cover and obsess and obsess and obsess, and it's like, get over it. Like, yes, there are times where a cover makes a difference, but then there are other times when you think about the use case, we're looking at a cover as a thumbnail on a Kindle. We're
Yes.
not reading books typically the way we used to, where it's this beautiful, colorful piece sticking out, popping out from a shelf against the others. Cool. Um, Lastly, what are some things that you're thinking about or have up your sleeve, or you're not wearing sleeves right now, but if you
Nope.
were, up your sleeveless, whatever, from a marketing of the book piece? And by marketing the book, it's not necessarily number of units sold. How are you
Mhm.
getting the book into the right hands of the right people to get you the outcomes you're looking for? It's probably a better way to frame that.
Yeah, I explained to people. I actually explained to my son the other day because when he saw some of the numbers yesterday, he reached out. He was like, "Cha-ching!" And I'm like, "Yep, that's not an extra vacation for us this year. Don't go crazy on me." But I told him, I said, I want to get paid on the back end. I
Yeah.
want to bring clients to the table that wouldn't have known me otherwise, who didn't know who I was. I'm well known in the startup space, in the VC back space, and in the Midwest. Although I've got clients in Europe as well, all over the country and the world, but my most exciting thing, like I had someone reach out to me today with a glowing review, like an amazing, like reach out to me on LinkedIn and told me how amazing. He's like, I'm already 2/3 of the way through the book. These are all the amazing things. And my whole sales team's going to get it. And every sales leader I know I'm going to get a copy for. And I copied that and sent that to my marketing person. And
Yeah.
she goes, do you know him? And I go, I
Right.
don't know him.
Right.
I didn't know him. I don't know him. And she was like, wow. And I'm like,
Right.
right. That's why I wrote the book. Like
Right.
I want to be exposed. I want to expose myself and my thoughts. This is my one to many to people that don't know me, didn't know me, and didn't have a clue that I existed.
Great. Well, best of luck with the continued success of the book, and
Thank you.
we'll check in a couple of months and see where it's going. So,
Perfect. Thank
appreciate
you.
your time today, Kristie.
Peter, thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks.